So good morning, everybody. Good afternoon or good evening, as the case may be. We have international folks joining, so the Clinical Trials Clubhouse is continuing to grow and become hopefully a great influential spot for us to gather and discuss some one burning question topics here. I'm Michael Young. I'm host for this week's Clinical Trials Clubhouse, which is now, I'm pleased to say, a formal club. And as we get started, I just wanted to give you a few clubhouse pointers. I see that there are some folks who may be reasonably new to Clubhouse. So just remember that you can use the plus button at the bottom to ping others you think may be interested in this conversation. You can narrow the search by using words like clinical or all people that would pop up, makes searching for people a little bit easier. Also, please check out and follow others in the room where they have perhaps touched a note that you might be interested in following up on. And you can follow any new people that have the so-called party hats on. I think folks are getting much more used to Clubhouse, and it seems like it's really becoming a great interaction point. And a request here. Please be sure to follow me and Heather, our other moderator, and the panelists and co-hosts here today. We encourage you to raise your digital hands if you want to speak, and Arika will make sure that you get brought up to the stage here. We're very grateful for our sponsor, Consuli, and wanted to let you know that Consuli is a startup, public benefit company with a mission to enable individuals to participate in the data economy, and that we are making an effort here to improve patient recruitment through kind of a disruptive approach here as well. Excuse me. There's no cost to join Consuli if you want to check us out at consuli.net and find out a little bit more about this. It's consuli.net. So now it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to my co-moderator, Heather Williams, who will be introducing herself and Dr. English, I guess. So, Heather,
hey,
now
Michael,
over to you.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. All the Clinical Trial Clubhousers, it's really great to see you all. So welcome to the fifth room, and our first, as Michael mentioned, as a full-on club for clinical trialists. So we always talk about one burning question in clinical trials, and Michael will introduce the question shortly. A little bit about me. I'm the head of project management and customer success for an e-clinical technology company. So we work with startups through to large pharma and medtech to help them plan and execute their clinical trials with a focus on their clinical trial technology. I also have a personal connection on the patient side of this industry, so I love getting involved in exciting discussions like this around how tech and innovative ideas can really improve and expedite studies, but most importantly, really help with patients and their advocacy and improving their journey. So I really appreciate it. I love that the Consuli team hosts these rooms every week, and it's really great to have you all here. You can learn more about anybody on the panel by checking out their profile. Just click on that, and you can add them, follow them. And if you see anybody in the group that's a newcomer, they have the little party horn or party hat. We want to make you feel welcome as well. So feel free to follow anybody. And so we all really like to gain your insights in a fun and innovative way, and that's what really gave rise to this group. So, we're really lucky to be working with Consuli. They're such an innovative team, and they're enabling data and AI for good, and in this case, in healthcare and clinical trials. We know your time is important, so just from a housekeeping perspective, we'll try and keep this to about an hour. Sometimes we go a little bit more. And during this time, we address the week's one burning question, which comes from a discussion usually during the last 5 minutes of our week before. So if you stick with us till the end of the show, what we'll be doing is polling everyone here and getting your great ideas for what we might want to talk about next. So let's get started. Let's open up the discussion on our question. But before we do that, I want to say hello to everybody on the stage this morning and have our guests introduce themselves. So if it's all right, maybe I'll start with you, Bill. and then we'll go through everybody else in the group. Bill, would you like to say hello to the group?
Yeah, I would, and thank you for having me. This is actually the first time I've been on Clubhouse, so this is quite exciting. So I'm Bill Byram. I'm VP of Product Positioning at Szmyd Health. Szmyd Health is a technology provider for clinical trials. And I've been in this industry for probably over 30 years now, about 10 years in pharma, in clinical development, and then the remainder of the time, mainly in technology companies supporting trials. So, yeah, great to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Sergio, if I can ask you to go next, please.
Sure. Thank you, Heather. My name is Sergio Armani. I'm Vice President of Business Development with Advara, serving large pharma and the CRO markets. My colleague in the audience there, Jim Park, serves the biotech space. We are a regulatory compliance organization that combines IRB and IBC review along with technology and consulting to make to help our clients make research better, faster, and smarter. Looking forward to today's session.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Evie, do you mind jumping in next, please, and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely happy to, and thanks for having me, everyone. So I am actually a healthcare attorney by trade with a deep international research ethics background who spent a decade in academic medical center life, actually cutting my teeth in this world on the IRB side, first and foremost, and then moving throughout all the different human research protection of the puzzle, as well as being embedded in a comprehensive cancer center to oversee all the quality and compliance at that site level, right? And then I've had the unique opportunity to work with First Class Solutions now for, I can't believe it, almost 4 years, running their clinical trials and research compliance line. So really about this topic and how we can use technology and options to bring more trials to patients. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I know we have a few other folks on the panel, but I think part of moving things along, Michael, if you agree, what we'll do is maybe you can jump in and talk about the question, and we'll have everybody else introduce themselves as they speak.
Yeah, that sounds good. I appreciate that. I think that we've got. I would like to just give Mary Ann Rizek a quick minute here to introduce herself.
Sure. And so, by the way, can I just commend you all for having such top pedigree and some seasoned veterans on this panel? I'll just clap for my colleagues here. But Dr. Marian Risk, I am a digital health technology strategist. I have been talking about transformation before we called it transformation. So I was back in the day ago, and since then, I've just been on this wild ride from pharma into biotech through startups, large tech companies like Oracle, GDPR partnerships and alliances, recently at IQVIA, and now independent, providing technology coaching and consulting to large tech companies, mid-market, and some of the emerging solutions. So real focus on decentralized trials and virtual trials and telehealth, and certainly all about partnerships and alliances, and had the pleasure of working with Mr. Mike Young on a number of different initiatives. So very happy to participate in today's session and looking forward to something very engaging with the audience.
Well, let's talk about that. Thank you very much, Marianne. And let's talk about that engaging piece here. So today's one burning question is, quote, gamification and competition in clinical trials and among sites. Is this a great idea or too many ethical and IRB concerns? Unquote. So we are going to start with our panelists and then open it to all of the rest of you here shortly. But I think we've got some great commentary coming forth. And just as a note, again, please raise your hand if you'd like to be called up onto the stage when we get to that section, so that Arika can bring you up. So, given Bill Byram has joined here at the very end of his week and day, we've asked Bill to join because Bill actually not only has some great insight into what's going on the gamification side of things, but he's actually one of the few people that's actually published in this area. So, Bill, I'd ask you to take the stage and actually give us some insights as to what do you see happening from a gamification and competition standpoint, and how you feel that might actually encourage better delivery for data and for site participation.
Oh, great. Thanks, Mike. And I wouldn't say that, yes, I did publish on this probably 5 or 6 years ago now in an article called Clinical Trials Respec in IEEE. And I really just reviewed in that article some of the things that I saw within our space, particularly around patients, but also applied to sites as well. I think maybe I do have some ideas on this, but perhaps just to frame things a little bit before we go further, think about perhaps what gamification is. And for me, a good definition is, I think, the use of video game elements with an aim to improve user experience or user engagement in non-game services and applications. So if we think about our daily lives, we see gamification all the time. We've probably all got frequent flyer cards, or maybe we're not using them that much at the moment, of course, but those sorts of loyalty schemes where you accrue points or tier points that might get you into lounges as rewards, or they might get you to accrue enough miles to go on a free flight, for example. Or even in your LinkedIn profile. I mean, I looked on my LinkedIn profile just earlier, and I noticed on the dashboard I have an icon that says I'm an all-star, which means that basically means I've completed most of the elements of my profile on LinkedIn. But again, it's a little badge that I've been given. Again, a gamification element, trying to drive a behaviour around me, obviously filling in and using my LinkedIn profile to the best. So I guess as we think about what gamification is aimed to do, we have these motivational drivers, and they could be things like reward. So the loyalty points, the frequent flyer points. It could be virtual badges. It could be virtual points. And then you've got other motivational drivers like avoiding loss. So avoiding loss, we see this in Snapchat, for example. So if you have teenagers, you're probably familiar with Snapchat. And in Snapchat, you continue to dialogue with individuals or groups. And if you do that every day, you accumulate what they call as a streak. So a number of consecutive days together. And actually, this becomes really addictive. And it drives behaviour for these people using Snapchat to continue those dialogues day on day out to maintain and grow their streaks. So that's really a loss aversion thing. If I don't log into that app, then I lose my streak. The other sort of drive there is around feedback. You're doing great, those sorts of things. And then finally, reputation. For example, having a leaderboard. So if you, again, perhaps in the context of sites, if you're looking at recruitment across a study, you might have a leaderboard, for example, whereby, you can see the sites who are at the top, you can see where your position is relative to them. And these motivational drivers are supposed to drive sort of physiological outcomes, so things like satisfaction. And that then drives behaviour. So if I'm a patient, it might drive timely completion of my patient diary, or it might drive me to make sure I attend my clinic visits on time. If I'm a site, it might drive me to provide clean data quickly, for example. And so I think that's kind of where we're interested in terms of, does gamification play a role in the way that we interact with sites through technology? I suppose the question is, what are the behavioural outcomes that we're trying to drive? And perhaps it's certainly clean data, and clean data quickly, perhaps. Perhaps patient recruitment, although it'd be very interesting to talk around that from an ethical standpoint. And I think the other question we need to ask is, when do incentives that we might put around these things? So, for example, clean data, we might use badges, we might use virtual rewards, or we might use actually financial rewards. But when do these incentives drive inappropriate behaviour, or actually get us simply to try to game the system? So, going back to the Snapchat example, I might just log into Snapchat to gain a streak rather than actually engage properly with the app. The same might be true if I've gamified, query resolution in my EDC product. I'm trying to incentivize quick completion of those clear queries, whereas actually accurate completion of those queries or resolution of those queries might actually take me longer. And so what I don't want to do is actually incentivize poor behaviour. And I think it would be really interesting to, I know Edie's on and you've got the legal background, it would be very interesting, and in fact Sergio, from an IRB perspective, when we think about incentivizing around patient recruitment, what we're trying to achieve there, of course, is hitting our recruitment timelines. We know there's always a bottleneck there, and we could use gamification elements for that, and we could use real physical rewards for that. But again, are we going to drive the pressure to recruit, to bring in perhaps ineligible patients or patients where we've got inflated baseline scores that that are going to show a bigger placebo effect and those sorts of things? So again, I think there's a lot of questions as we start to think about how this could apply to sites.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. That's really great insight. And does anyone on the team want to jump in with a comment?
Yeah, I would love to. I thought that was so brilliant, Bill, in terms of understanding the psychological behaviors that drive impact. I know it helped me with my new map to make sure I constantly continue to provide data and get and see those points. One of the things I would also anticipate further driving those behaviors at the site level is, even you mentioned badging. There's the ability for sites to, even if they were blinded, to kind of show like the highest performing sites, and whether that's through badging or even from an education enablement, even certification, that their ability to, let's say, become a virtual site with certain key capabilities, whether they're leveraging, some of the, dare I say modern, it's really now mainstream, but the e-consent and the telehealth and televisit and, all these technologies that a lot of the sites have been hit with overnight with COVID, right? Really propelling them forward. Do you see, Bill, certifications being part of the badging such that they can earn credentials that can then be a leading indicator for performance, in addition to some of these lagging indicators of high-performing sites when you see some of these points? Just want to know, from an education and rigor, do you see certification as also a badging strategy to drive that change?
I think definitely, yeah, that's a really good point, actually, Marianne. So I think that's right. And we do see, with a lot of solution providers, that idea of, certified sites or qualified sites, and having them, do some sort of training or something to earn that reward, or be involved in a trial to earn that status. But yeah, absolutely, I think that's an interesting one and a valuable one.
Thank you.
So this is Sergio. Kind of interesting. About a year and a half ago, I guess, I was doing a talk, and it was around driving, like, how do we drive efficiencies in clinical research, especially down at the site level, right? And, one of the things that I talked about was how it took the FDA to basically mandate the use of EDC before we would use EDC, right? Because sites had 20 different systems they had to log into, and sponsors didn't think sites were going to do it, so they didn't want to waste the money. And I said, it's going to take the next big thing for sites to start to adopt technology. And then COVID happened, right? So that was our next big thing, right? So, and it forced people to start to utilize different systems and to look at how we are managing clinical trials and looking at subjects as people and not just a data point on a chart somewhere, right? One of the big things that we all heard about during COVID was one of the struggles most of the sponsors had was getting diversity within their trial. And one of the big things that happened in clinical research that drove my industry to be developed were the Tuskegee trials, right? Where, you had African-American men very severely negatively impacted by clinical research. So you still today, 40 years, 50 years later, there's a cultural problem within clinical research. And how do you engage with subjects, and how do you keep them compliant with a protocol? And we've got to look at this from a lot of different areas, but technology is absolutely one way that can help with that.
Sergio, this is Michael, and I really appreciate those points. You bring up the Tuskegee experiments that were done and the impact and literally the lasting effects that those have now had in terms of participation, especially from various sectors of, whether they're minority or special interest groups. I think that has played out completely the same way in COVID, where we see the vast majority of literally hundreds of thousands of people who have now been engaged in the COVID trials, still representing that same dearth of minority participation. Is gamification a potential way of working this forward? And I'd be kind of curious from the IRB standpoint, with your experience, what kind of pitfalls that you see there.
So, the first thing that I've got to say is that I cannot speak for the board. I'm not a board member. So I've got to be careful in terms of giving those opinions. I can give you and speak to my wisdom and, how we have worked with and consulted with sponsors and CROs and sites on these topics. Luke Alinas, who's actually one of our board chairs, is in the audience. If, maybe we can get him pulled up, we may be able to. Oh, there you go, Luke. So, Luke, let me speak on it very briefly, and then we can allow you to kind of elaborate on it. So, yes, right? So, the IRB absolutely has opinions on this. Good, bad, and many times indifferent, right? It all depends on what you're talking about. And, but, we've gone as far as to actually invest in technology to help with this, right? So, we've recently acquired a very large platform to help with subject recruitment and retention, right? There is a need, and there's a positive need for that. We cannot drive research forward and develop drugs on a timeline that is financially feasible unless we have that. But there's got to be certain protections in place for the subjects along the way. So with that, I'll let Luke go ahead and speak to that side.
Thanks, Sergio. Hi, everyone. Luke Chatelanis. I am an IRB chair at Ivara. I'm a PhD in ethics, so formally trained. This is a great conversation. So I think there are concerns, right? Whenever you're sort of talking about influencing people's behavior, which I think is part of what's going on here, maybe in ways that are not working, right? You think about the literature on nudging and sort of how sort of big that's been over the last decade. I will say, I think it's really important to keep in mind the opening remarks, which is a lot of this stuff has become such a routine part and an accepted part of societal life these days. And if you think about the standard for risk that IRBs apply, a lot of the times it's based sort of in an assessment of everyday risks, right? The U.S. regulations say if you want to measure risks, look at what the everyday person is exposed to, and then try to figure out what the person in the study is exposed to and calculate the difference. And I think it gets hard for IRBs personally, it's my own personal view, to be too critical of these sorts of technologies and gamifications and sort of nudges when they become such a widespread and accepted part of society, because now they're just sort of part of everyone's everyday life. And it can look overly paternalistic, to me at least, for IRBs to worry too much and be too heavy-handed about that.
Very good. Yeah. This is Michael, and Luke, thank you so much for joining and offering that point of view, especially from your chair role. I'm interested to get Edie into the conversation because I think she definitely has some opinions.
I should have been taking notes, right? I'm very big on when I'm listening to a conversation, I want to be all in listening, and so I actually, if I with it, do not take notes intentionally because I'm a better listener that way. And now I'm like, I have so many things I want to say. So I think, Luke does a great job of bringing that ethics background that I share and that IRB perspective of it is supposed to be a local community level assessment of what is a daily risk. And because this type of technology, for better or for worse, has invaded our lives and so many elements of it, it's not, to me, the if, it's the how. And I'm a big person who goes back to, from the regulatory standpoint, what was the intent, right? And when we talk about it, I know people just say DISCI for short, but I was reminded by a fellow ethics scholar, huge shout to Quincy Birdsong, to always say exactly what the title of it was, to remind people of the severity of it, right? It was the Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in Negro males. That was the entire intent. It was right there in the title. And it was sponsored by the federal government, right? And we're talking about something that lasted into the early 70s. So this just isn't that long ago in our history. Having said that, is gamification on the level of what was taking place in that particular unethical example? I don't think it has to be, right? This is all about, again, the how, and going back to the regulator's intent of protecting human subjects, of protecting their volition, of protecting them from coercion. So, of course, we have to be extra delicate with this topic when we get into recruitment. Bill is very wise to say as such. But I think the bigger thing that strikes me as we're all talking through how would we get it IRB approved, how would it work, et cetera, is from my time both embedded in a site and working as a consultant at the site level, as with patient engagement entities and organizations, I come back to a practicality standpoint here. And some of it is about a good use of our dollars and time, and some of emotional intelligence. I mean, is the reason that data queries are always running so far behind at the site level truly because they need more reminders? Is it? I don't think so. Of cases, right? And so my question then becomes the practicality of what Bill touched on there at the end, which will this just be one more thing on the to-do list, one more thing on the checklist. And when you're talking those engagements between sponsors and sites, there's already some relationship issues. And you see certain sponsors, especially in the last year, really taking charge of that, creating site engagement teams that are more aware from the site level what they're going through instead of just pushing down requirements, right, and demands, and having better, more meaningful, supportive conversations with them. And that can feel a little bit touchy-feely, and a little bit, I always say, like, hokey or hippie, right? And I say that with love because I lovingly consider myself a hippie. But I think that we need to make sure that we're doing the research on what it is the gamification is supposed to be solving. Because, like, for example, in patient engagement and recruitment, the clients that I work with or the that I have, the pleasure of working alongside, that I see be really successful are because they know how to actually reach the patients through advocacy groups, through certain social media channels. Maybe they could use gamification to scale up therapeutic area. And so I think if we're not careful, we'll get really caught up on how do we get it IRB approved? Will the FDA say okay? How do we program this and move forward before we actually say, what is it we're trying to address with this, right? And do we actually have a handle on what the real problem is, whether it's on paper or in gamification, no matter how we're doing our research? So I'll park that there.
Edie, thank you very much. This is Michael, and Luke, you're blinking there. I'm not sure if that's your indication that you've got something to add.
Oh no, that was unintentional. I apologize.
Okay.
First time user.
No problem. That's what the party hat is all for, and this is all a great experiment here, as you know. Arka, I think what I may have you do is reset the room, just to make sure we've got everybody on board here.
Arka, did we lose you?
No, I'm here. I'm resetting the room. Sorry.
That's okay. It sounds good. This is an awesome conversation, and really appreciate the. Good. Okay. I think we're set here.
So, Michael, I got another point to make if I could at an appropriate time. So, I'm not sure who here has seen the recent documentary Social Dilemma, right? And, one of the lines in there really kind of blew me away when I read it is that, the members of a social media platform, we're the product, right, that's being sold. So if you think about the gamification of subjects within a clinical trial, and it comes down to almost a morality question, right? Like, at what point does looking at subjects and treating subjects as a data point start to backfire on you, right? And we start to go backwards. And that's something that I'd love to hear some answers to, because it truly is a question of mine, not something I have an answer to.
And I think, Sergio, just to backpack on that a little bit, this is Edie, that's a little bit of what I'm getting to, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
right.
Are we going to end up shooting ourselves in the foot here because we didn't really deliberately and intentionally utilize the technology that gamification brings with us in the best way possible to address an issue as opposed to just add more, right? Or to gamify more, to create quantity over quality. So, love that.
Yeah, I have a couple comments.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marianne.
Sorry, it's so difficult to figure out who plugged in first. So I think, Sergio, just to kind of piggyback off of what you mentioned, I think the first rule is like not even acknowledging that they're subjects and they're patients, right? And so with the gamification scoring mechanism, that's why my earlier question is it really gamification or is it some sort of like an educational type of layering system that talks about when you're engaging with the patient that they're now more aware and you can kind of quantitate that in a mechanism that it's not points, because with points it means bonus means some sort of monetary value, someone's high-fiving someone on the back end. I think if it's within an educational realm to show progress on how well do you know your disease? How well do you know how to manage your chronic condition? Did you know that you could do this? And sort of figure that out from an educational perspective.
Or like, what about if it was coordination, Marianne? Like, what, you got so many visits, so many things to keep track of. It's a whole new world for you. What if it just reminded you, hey, don't forget this is upcoming. Don't forget you got to hold your meds for that appointment. Don't forget to bring this paperwork, right? Where it just actually engaged the patient.
So I like where you're going with that a lot because therein lies, right, for all those tech geniuses in the audience as well as the on this platform here on stage, therein lies is the intelligence. And so as you are driving intelligent workflow to provide the right prompts, we call it the next best action, right, with your AI and ML, machine learning algorithms to help a user move to the next stage of wherever they want to go. Whether it's a learning path, whether it's a knowledge path, whether it's, to your point, a collaboration path. And I think that's the science and art of what we're trying to do. How do we get that individual, whatever that stakeholder, the patient, the site, the CRO, the sponsor, whoever those ambassadors are to help drive things forward, how do we connect them? Do we really call it a point system? Or do we try to figure out if from a gamification, how it's more of like a scientific workflow? And so I think there's an element of education, Michael, to your earlier point. Is it ideal? Am I pronouncing it right? You're good. Edie. So I think that coordination part is huge, right? Because we can't move in silos, right? So thanks, Marianne. I'm done talking.
Marianne, if I can just jump in real quick, I love that so much. And from my background to those in the room that are a little bit new, I'm on the clinical and technology side. And Sergio, I think this would resonate with you a little bit. We've actually been in discussions with some of the sponsors we are working with and the CROs we are working with about how do we add in additional content into those ePro patient diary portals that's allowing them to have that educational level. And do we stage that in, if they make it to, visit 8, suddenly because something more impactful happens after that, they're going to learn a little bit more and a little bit more as they go along. And the biggest issue right now is no one really seems, and maybe Edie, you can speak to this, no one feels super comfortable that they understand to what extent they can do it, and it feels to them a lot of times that they don't even know the channel and the lane they need to go through to approve some of this kind of stuff. So super interested to hear what everybody has to say about what's happening in the industry on the back end to enable some of this thinking, even if we can't execute it yet. I'm Heather, I'm done speaking.
And I'm happy to talk to that. I wanted to hear what Sergio would have to say, given and or possibly, I know Luke was up here earlier, like what is the metrics of what you can share, obviously, but of what you're starting to see on this front? Like, are you starting to see more and more trials utilizing different tools and mechanisms that start to get close to this? And then I'm happy to share at least what I'm working through with clients in terms of how we're approaching these topics.
Yeah, so, Sergio, we're always looking for the silver bullet, right? Like that one thing that's going to dramatically shift the way that clinical trials are being run so that we can get it done faster. right? So that we get the data that we need quicker. And there's never been a silver bullet, and there will never be a silver bullet, especially in the changing times. And it's also going to be different from protocol to protocol, from therapeutic area to therapeutic area, to indication to indication, right? Like what works in a type 2, in a phase 3 type 2 diabetes study is not going to work in a rare disease study, right? Or a late phase oncology study. And I think we need to look at, as an industry, right? We need to look at the bigger picture, with this being one part of the bigger picture. This is one pixel of the overall bigger picture, right? Like, let's start with site staff, right? Making sure that site staff are culturally diverse. If you're an African American man or woman walking into a research site in January of 2021 to potentially join a COVID study, and it's a bunch of blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, which typically it is, right? How comfortable are you going to be joining the study and staying in the study, right? So that's kind of my that's where I stand with that. We see a lot of different things. Lou can speak to it. The board blows me away on a regular basis because a client will get me on the phone and say, "Hey, Serge, we're thinking of doing this." And I'll be like, "Listen, there's no way in hell that's going to fly." And I'll get a board member on the phone and they'll say, "Absolutely." Right? So that's why I'm done speaking for the board, because I've gotten my hand slapped on both sides, because I apparently have no idea what I'm talking about. On a daily basis on where they stand, which is a good thing, right? Because that means that our board is constantly thinking outside the box to continue to drive research, because technology is constantly changing. So, Sergio, I'm done speaking.
Thank you so much, Sergio. I was going to say, I think you really allude to kind of my North Star, and like one of those first things that I say to a client or a colleague on a topic of getting regulatorily flexible, right, for creative.
Yep.
Because, man, I don't know if it's just because it's my language, it's my world, so I feel very at home there, it's not so scary to me, or if it's because it's an easy scapegoat, probably more likely a combination of the two. But we love to be like, regulatory. They'll never do it, right? And I like to really disarm clients of, don't tell me what you think the IRB will approve. Tell me what you want. Of ethics and volition that we're not going to discuss. But for the most part, people are so hung up on what will get approved, they don't use 100% of their brain to get really creative on how to reach that patient population, how to create that supportive environment, how to help them with the coordination and the life of being on the trial. And also, frankly, at the site level, taking care of each other, taking care of the teams at the site level, optimizing operations, efficiency, providing support. Those are all critical pieces, because our site level staff, if you want to call it, whether you're the PI, whether you're the nurse, whether you're the coordinator, whether you're the compliance team, man, they matter just as much, and they're just as human as our patients, right? They have their own journey that they may be going through. What if you're the only clinical research nurse on your entire staff of color in the last year?
Yep.
And suddenly you're supposed to speak up for your entire race on how to get particular patient populations in the door. That's not okay. That's not fair unless you feel truly empowered and supported to do so, right? And so I think that we have to come at it from that flexibility angle. And what I do in this space, as I've been talking through, is I'm usually on the phone with some tech folks, right? Some engineering folks, as well as some patient-facing, client-facing folks, all on a team. And I start to break down into buckets, like what I want to do and what, from my compliance mindset, are the buckets we need to think about that usually get most ideas to fruition. Is it a privacy issue? And is it a quality management system? Breaking that down piece by piece and saying, okay, so if you want to do that, these are the types of safeguards, mechanisms, etc., that are going to be in play, or these are the conversations that I want us to begin having, and start moving them toward that. Because the reality is, most of your sites, and especially actually like really disarm all this notion that, you know, regulatory will never let you do it. They have some cool ideas. And some of the tech folks are coming up with some of the best ideas. And when you start to have those conversations and they tell you what you want to do and you say, okay, well, now hold on. Could the system have an audit trail for that? Would it have a timestamp? Tell me how people are logging in the system. Suddenly they go, oh, well, we could work that out if we did this with this with this. Of course, by then they're speaking a language I don't understand. But I've told them what they need to do. I've told them what we're looking for, right? And so I think, you know, you have that space. I also think it's, you know, we've seen this really cool, and this is huge kudos to Advera, because I know you guys have been big on this even before COVID, but definitely during this outpouring of IRBs wanting to talk, wanting to come to the table. And I was on an earlier TGIF DCT right before this where Craig Lipset and Amir Khalil and a few other really great folks were talking about, you know, if nothing else, 2020 showed us that the regulators really do want to try work through this and have a deep understanding that the process is burdensome, and that's a compliment. And so, you know, don't discount us before chance to address this. It's not easy, but nothing good ever is. So, I'm Edie, I'm done talking.
This is Sergio. I couldn't agree with you more, Edie, right? We are at a pivotal place for the world, for the country, for the industry, as a human race, right? And there are a lot of 20 and 30-something-year-old tech guys who like 18 months ago couldn't afford rent or like a Burger King burger, who are now billionaires, right? Because they thought outside the box a long time ago. And it took something like COVID for the industry to look to do something a little differently. And I applaud them, and I applaud the industry, for taking the chance and starting to adopt some of that, because it's working. Right? We just need to continue that. And if we can continue that mindset and think outside the box, and not really kind of pigeonhole ourselves, the future is very, very bright. It's going to be a really interesting next couple of years. For John.
Excellent.
Fantastic. And I know that, Katie, I know you've been with us for a while up on the stage, and I would love to invite you if you want to jump in and say something.
Hi, it's Katie speaking. Thank you so much. Yes, I have been on stage for quite a while. I'll just quickly introduce myself. I am a scientist. I was finishing my science, but I was analyzing genomes, so I certainly have like a good understanding of the science and ethics behind things. Quite a few things I wanted to touch on. Thank you, Edie, and I think it was Sergio too that also said, please think of patients as, please refer to us as patients, not data points. That's quite hurtful sometimes. I am a long COVID patient, which is why I had to stop my PhD, and I have been sick for since June 2020. And I also wanted to say, Dr. Edie, as well, absolutely, in terms of what you said, utilizing existing support groups is such a great way to get people involved in clinical trials. I've been involved with the We Are Body Politic, which is one of the first support groups created for long COVID patients. And they've done patient-led studies. There's doctors that are in that group asking for different people to participate in different studies. So there's certainly people that would love to assist in all of these. So that's, anyone's more than welcome to reach me offline, contact me offline. Instagram's the best way to message me at the moment, because I struggle with computer screens. And also, Sergio, thank you. I appreciate you bringing up the differences in diversity and how comfortable you would feel walking into a clinical trial and everyone around you looking different. And I think that also goes back to asking, different communities, because I live in South Africa, although I have an Australian accent. But certainly, like, some clinical trials wouldn't work in that way of having to, log everything online or something, unless you are providing credit for internet, because most people don't have access to internet, or it's very expensive for them, particularly when they're living in the Black communities and just prefacing that. Coloured is a term here in South Africa that is recognised, and it means mixed race. It's not the same connotation it is in America and other places. So actually, like, asking feedback from those communities, you might actually get, they might come up with solutions and what works for them, and you might have better ideas to involve different diversities in your clinical trials. So again, I'm more than happy to speak on this at any time. So please send me in my profile. I've got my Instagram in there. You can send me a message, and happy to chat further about it. Thank you so much also for doing these clinical trials, because we certainly need the research, and long COVID patients really, really also need the research. So I appreciate you. It's Katie, I'm done speaking.
Katie, this is Michael, and thank you so much for your bravery and for your engagement on not only this topic, but certainly getting active in this arena, because we need to hear from people like yourselves, specifically in the long COVID side of things. Consuli actually has an independent clubhouse that we run on long COVID, and I think you may have actually been aware of that. But I'm glad to have that. We're very glad to have that input. Heather, who else needs to talk here?
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. I'm cognizant of the time, so we definitely want to open up the room. So a couple of housekeeping items, just a reminder to everybody, make sure you check out and follow the other people in the room, and all of our folks with the little party hats. They're new here, their first 7 days on Clubhouse, so make people feel welcome, support them. We appreciate you coming here and joining us. And I think that, and I apologize if I get your name wrong, but Chia, I think that you were next, if you wanted to jump in and tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Chia. I am an infectious disease physician, and also I am the global health lead over at the U.S. Federal State Department. I've been dealing with a lot of kind of interaction with the FDA, CDC, and the DSMB for a lot of the work with in terms of evaluating clinical trials. And I guess, like, for me, it's really just me putting myself out there, and also just kind of like, I want to hear from a lot of the industry folks, for everyone who is not necessarily dealing directly with the sciences itself, but to hear from other folks what are some of the hurdles and challenges that I can advocate, or a lot of the kind of like the other scientific folks that are in the federal spaces. What can we do to advocate? What can we do to help make your lives easier, and also ensure that we're reaching the most diverse patients in our clinical trial in the most efficacious way possible. I think one of the things with COVID we realized is that the old ways of kind of like really looking at clinical trials in an infectious disease standpoint, we need to expand and we need to evolve a lot of the standards and processes there. And I think there's discussions that are going on right now that I'm involved in, and I know that there's a lot of groups that are interested in seeing how best we can proceed forward. But until then, right now I would love to hear from the group, see what ideas are kind of being brought forward. And really, it's just me keeping my ears open and lending my hand to a lot of the industry folks that are in here. So I'm Chia, and I am done.
Chia, this is Michael, and that's brilliant. We encourage your engagement here, and this community is very, very interested in sharing what's working and what's not working, and exploring better ways to do this, because ultimately those patients are the reason we exist. We need to make sure that both from a government, industry, as well as the educational institutions, that we're all engaged in doing this. I think if you take a look at from afar at the success of bringing 5 vaccines to market within 9-10 months. It's a result of that kind of alliance making and that kind of collaboration. So thank you so much for engaging. This is Michael, and I'm done speaking.
Go ahead. Sorry. Chi, this is Edie. I was going to say, I wanted to ask you, because when we talk about technology,
one of the biggest pieces that I hear from my clients is the fear of Part 11 compliance in the United States, right? As well as GDPR, which you don't control by any means globally. And I'm very curious, and I know you can't, I mean, I get it, I'm a lawyer, there's only so much you can say, and you have to advocate for your own personal opinions, right? But I'm very curious how we can work together with the federal regulatory agencies, especially FDA, to provide that type of compliance, provide that type of verification that these technologies will in fact respect privacy, will in fact, inform users of what data is collected, where it goes, etc. But keep some of the more supportive, coordinating technologies or a gamification technique slightly more removed from some of the burden that like a Part 11 level comes with. Because I know, said time and time again, that's what I hear from clients. Well, we do that, but Part 11. Or we do that, but there's so much extra compliance that comes with it, we can't do that.
No, that's a good question. I think with regards to a lot of the data compliance and just in general some of the legality challenges that are around it, one of the many things that we're looking to explore is having industry days for a lot of these federal spaces to really engage folks on all levels, and especially from the data level as well, because we've realized that, like you said, there is a disconnect, and that there is not necessarily the agility that we have in terms of really connecting from a lot of these industry folks to kind of where we would like to be in agency-wise. So I think part of it really is, like, for me, I will advocate as well from that perspective. I know there are some voices, and unfortunately, I don't know who would exactly be the POC for that, but I'm happy to do some digging and figure it out from that perspective. But I know that the discussions are, they are having the discussions, but they're just not loud enough that, something would move forward. And I think engaging as much as you can in terms of like being vocal to FDA and to a lot of, and when you go to these industry days, and they're going to be offering a few more coming up, I think will really kind of create that bridge that's so sorely missed in a lot of these kind of like looking from the agility perspective of how we can do better of really empowering that kind of aspect of just the gamification of that data. So unfortunately, I don't have like a concrete answer for that, and I apologize. So
I can help with that. I was going to say, wants to follow up with me offline, and I'm just
awesome.
Conscious of the time. But so, as a former Oracle executive, being able to talk about data security, privilege, figuring out from a device perspective, how that data is being used, and so that is a number one concern. That's usually the apprehensiveness of actually adopting tech. So there are many answers, and there are different ways to talk about the data security, privileges, privacy, security. Most organizations will have a chief digital and data officer. So again, follow me, connect with me. I'm happy to make sure you get the answer that you're
Thank you both very much. And thank you for being here, Chi. I can't say enough like what Michael said. It just, even your presence and knowing that you're here, you're listening, you're advocating, that's a huge first step.
100%, Edie, and yeah, Chia. One of the things I'm looking at the time. We've got a little bit more time, but what we like to do towards the end, and what I'd ask everybody on the panel as well as the folks that are in the room here, feel free to put your hand up again if you want to jump in. Today's burning question was gamification and competition in clinical trials and among sites. Great idea, or too many ethical and IRB concerns? And I think that we've got a lot that's come out of this, and I would like to throw forward, and I'm putting you on the spot here, Chia. You don't have to say yes, but I would love, if it's not next week, another week for us to do something around the idea of how do we collaborate with the governmental agencies in pushing some of this forward. So for everybody else in the room, think about what you think we might want to talk about next week, and I will be quiet now and let the conversation continue. Thanks. I'm Heather. I'm done speaking.
Yeah, I think, Heather, to that point, if there are people in the audience who have opinions they'd like to share, please come forward and do that. I'm seeing a couple folks here. Leoma, did you want to contribute?
Hi, it's actually, and my name actually is an I, not an L, so it's Ijoma.
My apologies.
No worries, I get it all the time. Yeah, I was listening to the conversation in terms of clinical trials. I'm doing I got the COVID second dose event via my talk show that I do on here. So I got some people that were involved in the COVID clinical trials in the UK. I think it was Imperial, to come and speak. So I just wanted to kind of get a grasp of the conversation happening. I'm assuming you guys are from the Americas, so I was just trying to get a grasp of the conversations happening across the pond, really, and see how I can really contribute from a UK standpoint as well. And also, just whilst I host Healthcare in Colour, a lot of the concerns I get from Black and minority groups is how a lot of clinical trials don't include cohorts that reflect the population properly. So I just kind of saw this title and wanted to just see what I can gather from it, really.
No, gentlemen, this is Michael again, and absolutely, we recognize that the UK is experiencing some really unusual circumstances, and so especially getting kind of the people of color point of view is good. You're not the only UK participant. Bill Byram on our panel here is located in the Midlands, and so we are getting a bit of an international flavor today, which is great. Thank you. This is Michael, and I'm done speaking.
Thank you. And I always try to extend an invite to anyone I interact with on Clubhouse to come along to Healthcare in Colour. From the conversations, I learn something myself every time I help facilitate it. So definitely going forward, if anyone's interested, I'd love to get, like I said, an international conversation going, because it is so important, especially in this current climate. Community is more than just the country you live in, it's global. So thank you for the time to speak. Fantastic. Thank you so much. And Upendra, did you want to jump in? Did you have a comment? I see you're new to Clubhouse, so welcome. Please feel free to contribute.
Yes, thank you. Hi, my name's Upendra, and my first Clubhouse session, and it's absolutely fascinating. I think something I'm really going to get into moving forward. But I actually wanted to get back onto the topic at the start, which so Bill was talking about gamification, and we were talking about sort of, the competition amongst sites. And I suppose question/comment is, we've been looking at competition amongst sites, so taking out the digital, taking out the gamification, it's been there for a while. I mean, I remember, and some CROs still do it, but there was a lot of companies, what they do is they would do newsletters. And in the newsletters, which we publish papers going out to the sites, it would just be things like, investigator star of the week, ex-investigator got a gold star because they recruited X many things. Now, the intention behind that was really to inspire others to say, okay, well, next week, I want to have that gold badge and things like that. So it's been there. And I suppose the interesting comment is now that we're looking at gamification, we tag that in, and then we tag in the fact that it may be digital. We now start to bring up another set of questions. I find it really interesting that, how this kind of starts, kind of divulging and going to different areas. But so it's probably more of a comment rather than a question, but I'm not sure if anybody has any opinions on that either as well.
Hey, it's Bill here. Yeah, I think that's a brilliant point, and you're absolutely right. We have been doing that for some time, haven't we? And that is gamification, really. That's kind of I don't know. We can go back to those sort of behavioural drivers. I suppose that sort of fits in the reputation category, and the status category has been a motivational driver. So. So that, I think that's really interesting. I think what we haven't really seen, though, is the real digitised experience of that. So, if I go back to EDC as a great example, we're asking sites to enter data quickly. We're asking them to resolve queries quickly, and whether you earn a badge because you do stuff quickly or not, I think I'm not sure, and I think it's a little bit different when we think about business systems and as opposed to perhaps private consumer apps like like Snapchat or whatever. And we know our sites are diligent. We know they're hardworking. We know actually they have too much work to do. So I'm not necessarily personally convinced that gamification is always going to be a positive motivator to try to drive that behaviour. I think there are probably underlying other things that are actually getting in the way of completing data quickly or entering it quickly, down to staffing or whatever else. But I love the point about the newsletter, though. I think that's a really good point, well made.
Hi, this is Christine. So I was actually part of a portal that showed that in real time, and it was somewhat competitive or considered gamification, and I think it was a driver for us. We were one of the top sites, and so that was exciting. I guess my question is gamification. Are you wanting to implement any type of reward system, and if you do, what would the rewards be?
Christine, this is Michael. You might want to just introduce yourself a little too, because your background is pretty impressive.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm Christine. I am a clinical research coordinator, but I just accepted a position with a sponsor, and so that's going to be exciting. I start that role on April 5th. I'm also a brand ambassador for Latinos in clinical research, so for anyone and everyone, all ethnicities are welcome to join our group, and we do monthly webinars, and that's just a little bit about me. Thank you, and I'm done speaking.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Christine. And we also have Renee and Caroline. And I think we're going to go a little bit longer than our normal time. So we want to respect your time. So please keep in mind what you think you might want to contribute for our poll for next week's One Burning Question, what you'd like us to talk about. But maybe, Renee, we can start with you, and then Caroline after that.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Renee, she, her. I'm the executive chairwoman of a small group of Canadian companies involved in biotech and clinical research in psychedelics. And I wanted to use the word gamification, usually meaning gamification of the dopamine system from the IT perspective, and they invented it to do that. This is a rewards-based system designed to play on self-esteem and a number of other things. So aren't you accidentally creating a subclinical trial within a trial, potentially?
I had never thought of that. That's a really interesting point, Renee.
There's like a mic drop moment right now.
Everybody's minds just got blown, Renee, so thank you for bringing that to the table.
Yeah, so I'm going to think about it all day. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Michael, I'd open this up. Anybody who wants to respond a bit to that, and you may have just determined what our next week's One Burning Question is going to be.
So can I be the super devil's advocate here, Renee? This is Edie. So would the information we're finding out from the gamification, say you have phase 3 NASH trial that uses gamification to incentivize the site to get more patients on trial, or maybe it uses gamification to keep patients more adherent to the protocol, right? Are we going to share that information? Is that generalizable knowledge? Because that comes back to that definition of whether or not we regulate it as human subject research, or whether or not it is a quality initiative to make a process better. And that's where I would start that conversation, because it is mind-blowing to think about, and I love the point, but that's where my head goes, just as a devil's advocate or a supportive response. This is Edie. I'm done talking. Thanks.
The reason I brought that up, and this is Renee speaking, was that when you create data, someone else wants to use it. And so you're creating all this rich data that's showing the deep psyche of the individual, and you're using it for a reason. Now that you've created it, it now becomes its own thing that other people want to use. So it could be as simple as perhaps the pharmaceutical partner would like access to that, but it also just creates a problem that now that you've made it, you have to store it and protect it under HIPAA and all that other stuff. So the question is, do you want to create that data?
See, I struggle with that. I definitely can argue both sides of the coin. The whole point of gamification, you're absolutely spot on, right? It's a motivator, a reward system, the dopamine. But you can't deny that a more educated patient that understands what they're going through, whether it's through an e-consent module, whether it's through just understanding what's happening and the pathway, I think we all have recognized, right? Some of the challenges in clinical trials is the patients drop out. They're not retained, right? There are so many different, there's a myriad of reasons where they're no longer within that trial. And I think there's still this absent or need, whether we call it education, gamification, orchestration, something needs to usher these patients through. Something's also needed from a site perspective to make sure that they are driving operational excellence and efficiencies. We don't have a lot of white space. So I think, I'm concluding from this conversation with these elite speakers, and I feel so humbled to be around a lot of these folks here with domain expertise, is that maybe we move off of gamification and really translate it to something that doesn't have this malice intent or doesn't have an ethical upper hand of other sort of incentives, but there is clearly a gap of. I think I was speaking on mute the whole time.
No, we heard you, Marianne.
No, we heard you, Marianne. That was awesome.
We lost you at the very end there.
Oh, the finality was the best part.
We'll go for it again.
Oh, what did you hear? Sorry, I have a dog that's biting on my leg, and I didn't want to bark. I'm trying to train this dog.
No, Marianne, I think, you were clearly making the point, and certainly I'm certain that Renee understands this, that, it's the engagement and the need to keep these patients, not only getting them enrolled, but then effectively having the site interaction with that patient be something that not only gets you to the conclusion of the trial, but certainly provides the real continuity of the purpose for the trial and understanding how these patients feel about being involved in that trial. So there's no doubt about it that gamification has been, in a very simplistic way, looked at as a way to ensure or to encourage site activation and to encourage patient and then now when you add to it this entire massive movement to decentralize trials, there's even less face-to-face interaction with these patients. So how do you keep them engaged, compliant, and active in those trials? Does that make sense?
Yes, and Michael, I have a few points to make here. This is Christine. So from a patient standpoint, I think that a lot of times they always ask for the data. They want to know what happened at the end of the trial. They want to know if the medications got approved, so on and so forth. And a lot of times they never get those answers. So they don't really feel like participating in a study again because they don't know what the results were. And from my military background, I'd like to say in the military, we don't really use gamification when we use acknowledgement and we use recognition, and we have awards and systems like that in place. And so maybe implementing something like a reward or not a reward, an award or recognition would be better than gamification in terms of the IRB. I think I'm done speaking.
Fantastic, thank you. And Caroline, yes, please jump in.
Hi, how are you all? Nice to speak to you, nice to see you all. For me, I just think that a crucial part of any clinical trial is just finding a way of keeping the site and the patients engaged. And I know that at the very beginning we are all so enthusiastic and we've got the site's buy-in, but because they're often bogged down with so many other things, in particular the paperwork, the regulatory side and aspects of it, I think if we could split it in two and have one part that just does the clinical research, seeing the patients, engaging with the patient, incentivizing the patient, and then the other side of the team that just does the paperwork, I think that's where you can have stronger engagement running throughout the whole of the trial. And that's my piece.
I like that, Caroline. It's Heather here, and I'm going to add that to my list of questions that we're thinking about what we might want to talk about, because something around how the process of executing studies is being done, and is there ways to optimize that so that the engagement with that patient is really giving them what they need while the process of the busy work of doing the study is handled more in the background. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Hi, this is Yapinda. I've got one other comment, and I think somebody else said this right at the start, and I agree with this 100%. It really goes back to what is it that we're trying to do, right? I mean, I've seen people use, nowadays there's so many terminologies used. You've got behavioral science, behavioral economics, behavioral nudges being done, so trying to make it more into science, but I've seen gamification being used as a means of education. And so, if what you want to do is use a more of a animated storyboard or something else as a means of educating, such that somebody comprehends and understands the study better, you could do that. So maybe it's not more of maybe it's less of a competition. Maybe it's more of a game, so that somebody really gets into the whole role play and understands it a lot better. So it's used as more of an education technique, because I struggle reading 10, 20-page documents. So if I see things visually, or if I can interact with things, I tend to comprehend a lot better with those type of things. So if somebody presents me with something like that, I'll pick that up and I'll probably try and I will understand it a lot quicker than versus reading a 20-page document with lots of text on it. So it really goes back to what is it that we're trying to do with some of these things, and then trying to see what can be applied within, and I say within the boundaries of the IRB.
This is Michael, and that's a brilliant observation. So perhaps the educational component is maybe most saliently addressing things such as informed consent. So as we move more to an electronic informed consent approach, rather than 20 pages of stuff that most patients who are enrolling don't even understand, is there an option to employ gamification to help them with both expectations as well as comprehension?
Hey, this is Serge. I wanted to touch on 3 points. I had been giving a talk on certain types of clinical technology and how we're outdated, and it was the whole conversation around e-consent, right? I've been involved in 2 clinical trials myself. Both of them because I'm a 52-year-old boy that hurts himself playing all the time. In one, there was e-consent involved, and it was a glorious process, right? The second one, my wife was handed a 35-page document before I went into surgery. And she was horrified. And I looked at her, I said, I got this, right? Because I understand the informed consent process. But, how do we move away from 10, 15, 20, 30-page documents to something that somebody knows and understands? Will go a long way. Next point is to Christine's question around incentivizing patients along the course of a study to stay involved. One of the things that I coach my clients on before a conversation with a board member is to never use the word incentive, right? Because we cannot coerce subjects to join a study or to stay in a study. By law, right? Those are the regulations. We are allowed to reimburse them for their time and their expenses. So, we need to think of other ways of incentivizing them without it having a monetary policy associated with it. And then with regards to a clinical trial within a clinical trial, don't forget that there's the informed consent process, right? So there are a lot of informed consents that will talk about, the data involved in this clinical trial. If you accept knowledge that the data in this clinical trial or collected in this clinical trial may be used for a future study. Okay, that's fine. But unless it says that, it can't be used. It doesn't mean that people aren't making assumptions on it and, looking at the data and utilizing the data, but it can't be published in any way whatsoever. So I just wanted to make that point. Sergio, I'm done.
Sergio, thank you for that insight. I think that the concept of, the question of how remuneration for participation in a trial can be kept so that it is not an undue incentive to respond to the trial in a particular way is a real, it's a thorny proposition. Do you want to add to that a little bit?
Can you repeat it? I missed part of that. I apologize.
No, I'm just simply saying that, basically, we're finding it just much more difficult to keep everybody engaged in these trials. And your point about, payments, if you will, for participation in clinical trials does have this double edge to it. And you want to make sure that it's not an incentive to somehow color the outcome or color the data. Are there particular aspects, somewhat rhetorical here, but particular aspects of the IRB that you want to make sure that are enforced?
I think, again, without speaking for the board, because I can't, right? If we turn it back to my original point of treating patients as people and not data points, right? And you engage with them on joining a clinical trial because it's going to help them, right? There's an entire population out there that can't afford healthcare, right? Why not, engage with them about joining a clinical trial to potentially, support them in finding a cure for what ails them, or the whole aspect. There are large portions of the population that are willing to be involved in a clinical trial for the better good of the human race, right? So maybe look at other ways other than just a monetary policy. I'm not saying that money's a bad thing, right? Money helps, right? It certainly helps. And there are people that will only join a clinical trial for the money. And it's one of the reasons there's whole services out there around ensuring that people aren't involved in enrolled in 10 studies at once, because there are people that will do that, right? Collect as much money as they possibly can. We just want to ensure that they're not being coerced to join or to stay in a study when maybe they don't feel right, they don't feel good, they don't trust the staff. Like, they need to stay in it because there's a power now handing out in front of them.
And I think that the question is, how do we pivot that conversation, like you said, Sergio, if we're really treating these individuals as patients? How do we pivot the conversation and the use, and obviously incentive is a word we stay away from, but how do we create an environment that empowers the patient, creates a phenomenal patient experience, and calls upon, in my mind, the hallmarks of when we see the highest retention and compliance rates from patients, right? There's plenty of data out there that talks about the ways in which, and especially once you get very waist deep in individual therapeutic areas, the way that patients really feel supported, feel connected, and thus increase patient compliance, adherence to protocol, as well as walk away with an experience that may make them want to, or tell others in their family and their network to be a part of clinical trials. And so I think there's a safe way to do that an IRB, FDA, and any other regulatory agency would get on board with, because if you're calling upon, again, the hallmarks of what helps individuals feel empowered, have a better experience, and naturally, more organically be more adherent to their study visits, their study drug, whatever, is a part of their trial, then you really begin to have that engagement that, if we look at gamification from a noble perspective, right, that we're seeking from the patient. And obviously you have to have this conversation again as it relates to gamification with site engagement.
but it does it without placing a price tag on it in a way that really does get back to that coercive influence we want to stay so far away from. This is Zeke, I'm speaking.
Hi, this is Harold Solomon. I'm from Georgia Tech, and I'm working on 3 clinical trials now, and 2 of them are human clinical, one's veterinary. And the comments that Sergio, and Michael that made here have been intriguing, because one of the trials we're planning is going to be a phase 1 safety study. If we take one trial design route, you're recruiting healthy patients, and in almost every case, they expect to be paid or they don't participate in the trial. In the veterinary clinical trial for glioblastoma, it's we're offsetting the cost of the procedure to the patient's owners, to the dog owners in this case. And in the trial that we've yet to design, if we go the route of accompanying standard of care in our clinical trial, I'll leave it at that. There's no financial concern. So I guess my general point is there is no one size fits all answer at all to this. And then the people on the other side of the table, I shouldn't say the other side, they're all on our side. They're wonderful. The IRB folks in these academic centers, the more variability there is in a thing that is more prone to be template like informed consent, the harder their job, and the less likely they are to develop skills at it. So I love the idea of gamification to make the important salient parts real to the consenter, but it's got to be moderated against the needs of the machine that's got to run. This is Harold, I'm not speaking.
This is Sergio. Just an interesting point that many people may not here know is that for your animal study, actually, that is not reviewed by the IRB. It's reviewed by what's called an IOCOOK, and those animals actually have more rights than humans in clinical trials because the animal can speak up and say, I don't want to be involved anymore. Sergio.
Hi everyone, it's Heather here. Having a quick look at the time, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much everyone for your contributions. I mean, we've gone over time, but this has been wonderful. And so I just wanted to remind everybody that we do this every Friday at 12:30 Eastern. So we would love to have you come back and contribute next time. As we tend to wrap up with a question to all of you, I wanted to put out a couple of the things for ideas for next week, and also ask those on the panel who didn't get a chance to contribute yet if they had any ideas they wanted to add. We might not have a lot of time to dig back into some more information right now, but some of the ideas that were thrown out during our conversation today was talking about the processes, including gamification, that we use to run a study, and it does that, in fact, almost create a study within a study that might be influencing it. So Renee, thank you for that. We talked a little bit about payments and influence, and that sort of ties into that. We talked a little bit about how do we advance the relationship between the government and industry and patients to better meet the changing needs in clinical trials and move things forward more quickly. We talked a little bit about incentivization for patients and how to get them to stay on the study, maybe more around information, reward, recognition, helping them understand what happened in the study. We talked a little bit about e-consent. We also spoke a bit about how do we break up the trial team maybe to think about a patient-facing role that allows for that engagement, as well as maybe the document doers in the background who might not work with those patients. And we also talked a little bit about how do we start to tackle these and maybe, poke into some areas where we can say, let's improve these things quickly now because they're easy, they're quick, they're compliant, and maybe sort of categorizing some of the things that come up in these meetings into groups where we could start to tackle them and really affect some change. So I'm Heather. I'm going to finish up speaking. I would invite anybody on the panel here who wants to contribute a poll idea for our next discussion to jump in right now while we take another sort of 5 minutes or so to wrap up the room, and Michael, I'll turn it over to you. I'm Heather. I'm done speaking.
Excellent, Heather. I note that Andy is hanging in here, and so Andy, if you want to add a couple comments, and if you have a suggestion for how we continue this conversation with next week's burning question, why don't you launch into it?
Thank you so much. So real quick, I guess I just wanted to I guess piggyback off what everybody's saying in regards to like the incentivization or like keeping folks, within the study. I guess I think it all comes down to, and I think Heather just said it, is information or healthcare literacy. But I think I'm just going to wrap that up because I think we're finishing.
Thanks, Andy. Hopefully you'll be able to come back and join us next time. We would love to hear a little bit more from you. Michael, did you want to close out the room?
Yeah, I just wanted to obviously point out that this has been a really wonderful collection of contributors, and I think that we're finding the Clubhouse experience to be really energizing. We hope you do too. In addition to following us on Clubhouse, you can find our direct message information in our profiles, and you can drop us a message anytime with comments or suggested topics. And importantly, we really look forward to welcoming you back next week for another OBQ, our one burning question. And in closing, I just wanted to say sincere gratitude to my co-host, Heather Williams. You are awesome, my dear. And to my these awesome panelists that we've had today. In particular, I want to point out Sergio. Great comments. Thank you so much for engaging from the Advara side of things. Bill, Byram, staying up and cooking in here late on a Friday evening in the UK. Appreciate that help as well. And Edie, as always, as I mentioned before, effervescent commentary. And Marianne, thanks very much. And to the new folks that have joined in this, Chia, thank you so much. Christine, Renee, Caroline, Harold, and Andy, thanks again for joining. We can't do this without the audience participation, so you make this all a very fabulous discussion. And thanks again to our sponsor, Consuli. Erica, would you please take us out?
Hi everyone, this is Arika speaking. I just want to echo what Michael said. It has been an honor to be a part of this invigorating conversation. I just want to close out with some important announcements. Be sure to follow me and all our moderators, panelists, and co-hosts here today. Also follow our club by clicking on the little house on the screen. You can check out our profiles to see details of the other rooms Consuli hosts on long COVID, where patients meet researchers, data dignity, and this clinical trials room, where we look forward to seeing you again next week. You can now add this to your calendar through Clubhouse directly, which is a wonderful new feature. You can also find Consuli on social media. That's at Consuli_Inc. That's CONSULI_Inc. And for direct questions, comments, feedback, you can find me and our team members and panelists DM in their profiles. We would love to hear from you, and we look forward to our next Clubhouse discussion next week. Thank you so much. I'm Arika, done speaking.
Thank you, Arika.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Awesome weekend.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for all your contributions, everyone.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. Bye.